सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। सदाशिवसमारम्भां शङ्कराचार्यमध्यमाम् अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्तां वन्दे गुरुपरम्परां। रामो राजमणिः सदा विजयते रामं रमेशं भजे। रामेणाभिहता निशाचरचमु रामाय तस्मै नमः। रामान्नास्ति परायणं परतरं रामस्य दासोऽस्म्यहम्। रामे चित्तलयः सदा भवतु मे भो राम मामुद्धर। समस्तजनकल्याणे निरतं करुणामयं नमामि चिन्मयं देवं सद्गुरुं ब्रह्मविद्वरं सद्गुरुं ब्रह्मविद्वरम्। ॐ श्री चिन्मय सद्गुरवे नमः। 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 12th verse onwards, 13th chapter. नेयं यत्तत् प्रवक्ष्यामि यज्ञात्वामृतमश्नुते अनादिमत्परं ब्रह्म न सत्तन्नासदुच्यते। सर्वतः पाणिपादं तत् सर्वतोक्षिशिरोमुखं सर्वतः श्रुतिमल्लोके सर्वमावृत्य तिष्ठति। सर्वेन्द्रियगुणाभासं सर्वेन्द्रियविवर्जितम् असक्तं सर्वभृच्चैव निर्गुणं गुणभोक्तृ च। Having explained Kshetra, having explained little bit about Kshetrajna, having elaborated about Jnanam in the form of different sadhanas, Bhagavan is now taking up the topic of Neyam. And he says, Neyam is Kshetrajna, the pure consciousness. I will explain different aspects by which this Neyam can be clearly understood. The technique Bhagavan uses for elaborating Neyam is called Adhyaropa Apavada. Superimposing attributes, superimposing unreal attributes on the reality, with that helping us shift attention to reality and then removing those attributes. A removal of attributes is called apavada. Superimposing attributes is called adhyaropa. Now, why can't we directly point out the truth? We had seen this truth doesn't have any qualities. So if you need to point out something, you either need some attribute, or you need some action, or you need genus, or you need relation. And consciousness is that which doesn't have any of these. So how will Upanishads point out such an entity which doesn't have any conditioning? And it has to be pointed out as one's own self. So the main technique employed by Upanishads is called Adhyaropa Apavada. Because the truth doesn't have conditionings, unreal conditionings are superimposed. With that, we can shift attention to the truth. Having shifted attention there, I can drop the conditionings. If I pay attention only to conditioning, that is not called Adhyaropa. Conditioning plus consciousness is Adhyaropa. Pure consciousness minus conditioning is Apavada. So if you look at percentage of time spent, majority of our time will first go in understanding Adhyaropa. That whenever I look at conditioning, I should be able to pay attention to conditioned consciousness. Body we interact with day in and day out. But this thought doesn't come very often that body is enlivened by consciousness. Sense organs are being used, mind is being used. If my attention is only on speaking, only on mind and the nature of thought, that is not Adhyaropa. If I am able to see body plus consciousness, thought plus consciousness, that is Adhyaropa. Then when I understand body and mind are unreal and consciousness alone is reality, in my understanding I can drop conditionings. That abidance in unconditioned truth is called as Apavada. So both steps are important. Adding conditioning is important, and while adding or having added, to understand conditionings are unreal. If I remain with this erroneous notion that these are real conditionings, then Apavada will be difficult. A real entity you cannot just drop. Unreal entity can be dropped. So we had seen different examples for Adhyaropa Apavada. One example was space and pot. Paying attention to space is difficult, but if you have the conditioning of pot, to pay attention to pot space is easy. So that pot represents thought. To shift attention to consciousness is difficult, but to shift attention to witness of thought is easy. Okay, I'll ask another question. Witness of thought. This particular title of consciousness, is it Adhyaropa or Apavada? Consciousness is witness of thought. Is it step 1 or step 2? Step 1. Advaita Vedanta doesn't want to point out the truth only with the conditioning of mind. Mind is a doorway to the truth. Kenopanishad we had seen this. Pratibodha viditam matam. Every thought becomes a doorway to consciousness. But just like I should not remain with this idea that space is only available as spot space. What is true understanding? Pot and space have no relation. Because I wanted to shift attention to space, I took pot as the support. In the same way, consciousness and thought are not related. But I can use the thought to shift attention to consciousness because thought is illumined by consciousness. See, here also, whenever you see Shankaracharya ji paying lot of attention to this point, that illumination is not an action. Consciousness is there as it is. Thought which is in its proximity gets illumined. Just like there is fire, and you bring firewood near the fire, wood starts burning. You ask, who burnt the wood? What will we say? Fire burnt the wood. Then you go and ask fire, did you burn the wood? Fire will say, I was just there. I did not do any action of burning. Action of burning happened from the standpoint of conditioning. So this concept of Adhyaropa Apavada will really help us to shift attention to unconditioned consciousness. If we appreciate how this works, but first of all, recognize the importance of conditioned consciousness. I cannot shift to unconditioned consciousness unless I shift attention to conditioned consciousness. Another example we had seen was of the windsock. The wind is difficult to notice, but the windsock tells me which direction the wind is blowing. It helps me recognize the presence of the wind. So seeing wind and windsock is Adhyaropa. Understanding that there is no relation between wind and windsock, shifting attention only to wind is Apavada. You know, when you listen to some song, if you know the raga, it is said the joy of that song is greater. You know the swaras which are there, how they are getting used. The raga over here is Adhyaropa Apavada. Same raga, different songs. These are the verses that we are seeing right now. If you appreciate the technique of Adhyaropa Apavada, we'll enjoy these verses, how Bhagavan is employing them to convey the truth. 13th verse we had seen, Sarvatah Panipadam Tat Sarvatah Shishiraha Shishiro Mukham. It is that truth which has hands and legs everywhere, and it has face, and whatever heads can be seen, all of them are appearing in that consciousness. Panipadam means hands and legs, Shishira means head, Mukham means face. These are conditionings. Wherever they are seen, they are all seen in consciousness. But in poetic language it is said, consciousness has all hands and legs and heads and faces. Sarvata Shrutimal Loke. All ears which are seen, they also belong to consciousness. Sarvam Avrutya Tishtati. Pervading all, it is seated. In this particular verse, what is done? Option number 1, only Adhyaropa. Option 2, Adhyaropa and Apavada. Option 3, only Apavada. Option 4, none of the above. How many of you say only Adhyaropa? How many of you say Adhyaropa and Apavada? How many of you say only Apavada? Okay. Why do you say Adhyaropa and Apavada? Where is the Apavada line here? Huh? Sarvam avriti tishtati, pervading all it exists. Where is Apavada there? Apavada means you have to remove the conditioning. What this verse says is, pervading all these conditionings, it is seated. So this particular verse is only Adhyaropa. Consciousness is pointed out through conditionings. Now next verse you see. Sarvendriya gunabhasam. Abhasam here refers to avabhasate. That which makes itself known through the functions of all conditionings. Functions of sense organs in particular. Sarvendriya gunabhasam, sarvendriya vivarjitam. But by itself it is devoid of sense organ. So what is being done here in the first quarter? Adhyaropa. Sense organs are added and consciousness is pointed out as enlivener of sense organ. But that is not complete knowledge. What is the nature of consciousness? Sarvendriya vivarjitam. That is apavada. It is devoid of any sense organ. Now how can you remove sense organs? Only if you have understood the conditioning of sense organ is unreal. Sarvendriya vivarjitam. Asaktam sarva bhrutchaiva. Asaktam means it is asanga, unattached. But at the same time, it supports all, nourishes all, sarva bhrut. See the contradictions. Asanga means unattached and sarva bhrut means nourishes all. How can it be unattached and yet nourishing all? His unattached is without conditioning. Asaktaha is without the conditioning of Maya. Sarva bhrut is with the conditioning of Maya. As pure consciousness, it is a substratum, which is unattached. But with Maya Upadhi, it becomes nourisher. Asaktam sarva bhrutchaiva nirgunam guna bhoktrucha. First apavada is shown here because of the shloka. What will be pointed out first is guna bhoktru. Guna bhoktru means one who enjoys all different gunas. But in its essential nature, it is nirguna. That which can take different attributes, but by itself it is attributeless. In fact, only that thing which is without attributes can take on other attributes. Water, for example, doesn't have taste of its own. So you can add other tastes. But if you have lemon water, now if you add other taste, it will not be distinctly noticed. So that which doesn't have its own attribute can easily take on other attributes. That which doesn't have its own sound, silence, you can play other sounds in that silence. But let's say you have one scale playing C sharp. Now you better play the same scale, otherwise some other scale will appear off tune. So that space which has its own sound, it is difficult for that space to take other sound. That space which is without any sound becomes a support for other types of sound. One commentator says, we can learn many sadhana attributes from Brahman. This is not Advaita Vedanta teaching. Advaita Vedanta teaching is what is nature of Brahman. But there is no harm in learning. He says a person can be accommodative of others if he doesn't have strong opinions of his own. If he comes with his own strong opinion, he will find it difficult to work with other person's opinion. That is this line, Nirgunam gunabhoktrucha. That consciousness which doesn't have attributes of its own becomes the support for other attributes. 15th verse, you see, nature of consciousness, again elaborated. Bahirantascha bhutanam acharam charameva cha sukshmatva tadavidneyam durastham chantike chatat. Bahirantascha bhutanam acharam charameva cha sukshmatva tadavidneyam durastham chantike chatat. That which exists outside and inside. Here no verb is given, but we have to understand it as exists. Where does it exist? Bahihi antaha. Shankaracharya says, just think about this. Whenever the word outside and inside is used, what it means is, there should be some frame of reference. If there is an open space, and you go with your friend to that open space, open ground, and you tell the friend, stand outside. What will he ask? Outside what? Unless there is a boundary, outside, inside, doesn't make sense. So in that space, in that open ground, let's say there is a room. Then it makes sense, stand outside the room. So that room becomes the boundary with which we define outside and inside. Now Shankaracharya says, think as far as our day-to-day transactions are concerned. As far as Jiva is concerned, what is our boundary to define outside and inside? Our boundary is this body. Bahihi tvak paryantam deham. He says, until the skin, we call it as inside. Atmatvena avidya kalpitam. He says, we call everything which is inside this layer as inside, which is beneath this layer as inside. He says that is because of avidya. Apeksha tam avadhim krutva bahi uchyate. Having created the boundary of this body, we say everything that is outside as outside. Everything which is beyond this body as outside. And what is consciousness? That which is present outside and that which is present inside. Through this concept of outside and inside, consciousness is indicated. So what will this be? Adhyaropa. Bahihi antaha. Really speaking, is consciousness outside or inside? The notion of outside and inside is in consciousness. But I can use these conditionings to point out consciousness. Bahi antascha bhutanam. Now what made this notion of outside and inside to come about? Acharam charamevacha. The bodies of inert and sentient beings. Acharam means that which doesn't move. Charam means those things which are moving. So what is consciousness? That which is present in unmoving and that which is present in moving. Acharam Charamevacha. One commentator, he writes, this body is that which is bringing about the notion of outside and inside. And we say, through Adhyaropa, we are pointing out truth. And in Apavada, what will we be doing? We'll be dropping body identification. Because it was the conditioning which brought about this notion of outside and inside. Through that, truth was pointed out. But in Apavada, if you have to let go of notion of outside and inside, he says we have to let go of notion that I am this body. And he says, no matter how much logic you use, it is not easy to drop the notion, I am this body. He says, you might have studied Vedanta for several years. But if somebody calls us short, nowadays you don't call short, right? Vertically challenged. I feel they are calling me short. He says, notice this point very carefully. Apavada of body is unlike other apavada. See, in the example of windsock, in the example of pot and space, it was very easy to drop pot. But there is a technique to drop body identification. Merely by saying body is mithya, nothing is going to happen. You see, the technique is getting more and more clarity of the substratum. If adhisthana jnanam becomes druda, knowledge of substratum becomes strong, in the light of that knowledge, the impact or the hold that superimposed has on us, that will slowly start reducing. That's why in Dridrisha Viveka it was said, Dehabhimane galite, Vijñate Paramatmani. Galite means if you put a pill in water, it will not go dissolve right away. Slowly it will dissolve. So how will this Dehabhimana dissolve? When Paramatma becomes very well known to us. Vidyananda Swamiji is telling us, this Dehabhimana to weaken, it will take time. And let us not get too worried about weakening Dehabhimana. He says, strengthen Vijnana of Paramatma. Vijñate Paramatmani, yatra yatra manoyati tatra tatra samadhaya. Then wherever the mind goes, there we will have samadhi. Meaning, mind is understood as mithya. But this point is important. The body is in the place of that snake. Merely by saying snake is unreal, our fear of snake doesn't go away. The question still remains, what if it is still real? So our effort should not be in merely saying that snake is unreal. Our effort should be to first get a light. Second effort is to put that light on the snake. Then get clear knowledge of the rope. Then you don't need too much of repetition. Snake is unreal. Same thing about this body. Where did this body come from? Kastvam koham kuta ayatah. Kame janani kome tatah. Iti paribhavaya. Think of this again and again. Where did these conditionings come from? Until we get this conviction that they have emerged from consciousness, this is keep thinking. Don't just look at immediate cause. Child is born from parents. But that is not what is being asked here. What is the absolute cause? Okay, this is the implied meaning of the word acharam charamevacha. This body brings about the distinction between outside and inside. That is Adhyaropa. And in Apavada, we confidently say, remove this body. But the commentator writes, it's not that easy to remove. So what is needed is adhisthana jnanam. Sukshmatvat tadavidneyam. Bhagavan, just now you said, Neyam yattat pravakshami. I will tell you what is to be known. And now you are telling me, it is very subtle, it cannot be known. Sukshmatvat means, because it is very subtle, tat avidneyam. It cannot be known. Be careful here, huh? It cannot be known doesn't mean it is unknowable. Whenever the word avidneyam is used, add one more word before it. Or one word after it. It is unknown as an object. Vishayatvena avidneyam. It is unknown through sense organs because it is not an object of sense organs. Think of it this way. Our mind, our intellect, our ego, all these things don't become an object of sense organ. And very often they are missed. We pay attention to chair, we pay attention to wall, we pay attention to objects. How many times are we able to pay attention to mind? Which is also an object. How many times we are able to pay attention to I thought? The ahankara which is witnessing this world. So these things which are part of Maya, mind, intellect and ego, which are objects. But because they are not object of sense organ, they become difficult to be noticed. What to talk about that self, which is beyond mind, intellect and ego. That is the meaning of the word sukshmatvat. It is hidden behind names and forms. Names and forms are seen, but consciousness is sukshma. Sukshma is not small in size. Sukshma means that which doesn't become object of senses. Sukshmatvat tadavidneyam durastham cha antike cha tat. On one hand it is very far, and another hand it is very near. For whom is it far? Shankaracharya writes, avidnyatataya durastham varsha sahasra kotyapi avidusham aprapyatvat. To the one whose ignorance has not been destroyed, the self is very far. So far that even if he strives for thousands of years, still he will not reach. In some other places it is said, if somebody has an impure mind and is unable to appreciate Vedanta as pramana, for that person, the truth is very far. Then at the same time, it is very near. Tad dure antike cha tat. Antike means it is very near. For whom it is very near? To that student of a pure mind who has understood, reflected, internalized Mahavakya. Self is available as one's own nature. Means he comes to understand Brahman or consciousness or reality was never different from me. So realization for him is not an event. Realization is not an incident in time. If you make it an incident in time and place, then time and place will still be real. The understanding is, I was always that self, even when I thought I was bound. The best example for this is, if somebody is in a place and thinks that he is lost, how will he reach that place? If I'm in San Jose and I want to go to San Jose, he says, as long as you want. You keep that ignorance, protect that ignorance, it will take that much time. To that extent, it is far. How will I reach San Jose? By understanding that I was always here. That is this quality of Durastham Chantike Chatata. Truth is very far if you want it to be far. Truth is very near if you allow knowledge to take place. Think of it this way. The one who is seeking Brahman, the seeker, one who does sadhana, one who does meditation, one who does shravanam. Who is this person colloquially? What is the vachyartha of this person? Ahankara or jiva? What is the essential nature and what is this jiva seeking Brahman? What is the essential nature of jiva? Brahman. So in a way, Brahman is searching for Brahman. Brahman searching for Brahman. The day I realize I don't need to search, that is when this Brahmajnanam has started working. To the extent I keep searching, to that extent it is one form of avidya. Now Bhagavan says another way of indicating. Remember, the background raga is Adhyaropa Apavada. These are different songs in that same raga. Good musician should be able to recognize the raga in the song. Okay, see in this song if you can recognize what is Adhyaropa, what is Apavada. Avibhaktam cha bhuteshu vibhaktamiva cha sthitam bhuta bharatru cha tadneyam grasishnu prabha vishnu cha avibhaktam cha bhuteshu vibhaktamiva cha sthitam bhuta bharatru cha tadneyam grasishnu prabha vishnu cha avibhaktam cha bhuteshu. Vibhaktam means divided. Avibhaktam means undivided. In all beings, the truth is undivided. Bhuteshu means in all beings. Avibhaktam, it is seated as undivided one truth. Vibhaktam iva cha sthitam. But in all beings, it as though appears divided. Bhagavan Krishna here wants us to pay attention to the word iva. He says whenever Adhyaropa is done, that word iva should be added. Best example for this is space and pot space. If there are 100 pots, how many pot spaces do you have? 100 pot spaces. But each and every pot space is not really there. What is there is one infinite space. Pot space is as though appearing because of the conditioning of pot. But there is no difference between total space and pot space. So here also, the self which is illumining Ravana's heart and the self which is illumining Vibhishanji's heart or Hanumanji's heart, he says there is no difference in the self. The Atma of Ravana and Atma of Hanumanji is one and the same. Conditionings are different. We will do pranams to Hanumanji, not to Ravana. But as far as the self is concerned, there is no Rakshasatma and Devatma. Atma is Atma. But it as though appears different because of conditioning. Avibhaktam cha bhuteshu, vibhaktam iva cha sthitam. Now this is a very nice phrase. Bhuta bhartru cha tadnyeyam. Bhuta bhartru means it is the nourisher of this creation. Bhuta means all beings. Bhartru means nourisher. Look at the next quarter and tell me who is being referred to here. Bhuta bhartru cha tadnyeyam grasishnu. Grasishnu means one who devours. Prabha Vishnu cha. Prabha Vishnu means one who gives birth. Sustainer, destroyer, creator. 3 different names. It is that same Neya Vastu which is called as Vishnu, as the nourisher, destroyer as Lord Shiva, and creator as Brahmaji. Lord Vishnu, Lord Shiva, and Brahmaji. But remember, what is pointed out here is pure consciousness with these conditionings gets these 3 names. The form with their bow and arrow, jata, juta, that is for us to worship and connect. What is their essential nature? Bahula rajase vishvotpattau bhavaya namo namaha. Along with the conditioning of Rajoguna, along with Sattvaguna, along with Tamoguna, you are given 3 different names. One is called as Vishnu, one is called as Shiva, one is called as Brahmaji. Consciousness gets 3 names with these 3 conditionings. Now Shankaracharya ji mentions a very important point. He says, remember, when you are talking about creation getting nourished, always add the adjective unreal creation getting nourished. That unreal adjective, mithya adjective should be added. He says, Bhuta bhartrucha bhutani bibharti iti tadnyeyam. Bhuta bhartrucha sthiti kale. Sthiti kale means when it is appearing. What is appearing? Unreal creation is appearing. So how does consciousness nourish creation? Nourishment, generally our idea is by giving some drink or giving some food. Because nourishment goes with physical body generally. Nourishment of creation by consciousness is by providing existence. By providing Sat, creation gets Satta. And one commentator, he writes a very subtle point. He says, this whole creation is run by karma. We have certain desires, because of which we do certain actions, we get results. Those results produce more desires, and the cycle keeps going on. He says we will not have desire for an unreal entity. Unless the world appears existent, unless there is Satta in this creation, it will not even run. So how does consciousness nourish creation? By lending its existence, world is known to exist. And once we think that a thing exists, desire can take place. That desire will push a person into more actions. And in this way, creation is very well nourished. Through the cycle of karma siddhanta, creation keeps on running. When will this running stop? When I gain clear knowledge of Sat. My quest for Asat will stop only when I get clarity about nature of Sat. So he says there are two paths which are spoken about. One is path of pravritti, another is path of nivritti. He says until we are ignorant about Sat, we will keep cycling in the path of pravritti. And whenever this knowledge dawns upon us, that this is an appearance which doesn't even have its existence, there is some real entity which is a substratum of this entire Jagat. He says, until this knowledge takes place, we will be on the path of pravritti. But the moment we want to seek that truth, we start walking on the path of nivritti. He has mentioned several points here. Consciousness nourishes creation through Sat, as Sat. We never have desire for unreal things. Desires are there because we think they are real. And once that desire comes, consciousness doesn't have to do anything. Cycle will run of karma, creation will be very well nourished. But once a person seeks the truth, he is tired of this Asat Jagat. Somewhere he gets to hear this. He says then his path changes to Nivritti Marga. That is the implied meaning of Bhuta Bhartrucha Tatneyam. Grasishnu Prabhavishnucha. Grasishnu, Shankaracharya says, Pralaya Kale Grasishnu. Grasana Sheelam. See, one meaning of Grasishnu is at the time of Pralaya, when this entire universe dissolves, it dissolves into consciousness. It goes back into the self. But another meaning of Pralaya is when knowledge of truth takes place, names and forms get dissolved. We realize what I was calling as this object was not really an independent entity. How does the snake get nourished by the rope? By lending existence. How does the snake get dissolved in the rope? Through knowledge. There is nothing like a wax melting, dissolution happening, where this snake slowly melts and goes into the rope. So you just get knowledge of the rope, we understand there was nothing called a snake. So how will Grasishnu work? All Nama Rupa dissolves into Sat. Grasishnu Prabha Vishnu cha. What is Prabha Vishnu? Utpatti Kale Prabha Vishnu cha Prabhavana Sheelam. During the creation time, one who brings about creation. This is the name of consciousness. Remember, what is being pointed out here? Nyeya Vastu. Nyeya Vastu is mentioned as Bhuta Bhartru. Nyeya Vastu is mentioned as Grasishnu. Nyeya Vastu is mentioned as Prabha Vishnu. Prabha Vishnu means at the time of creation, the one who brings about creation is that consciousness. If we think Prabha Vishnu to be only Brahmaji and some person, you see, that is not Adhyaropa. Brahmaji is okay, who is conditioning. Along with conditioning, I should include consciousness. So from this conditioned consciousness, world emerges. What is Apavada? That consciousness from which nothing emerges and nothing dissolves back into. Really speaking, Mithya Vastu need not be nourished also. True or not? If you keep saying this statement, snake is nourished by the rope. What does that mean? In a way, I am giving reality to snake. So that nourisher title, is it Adhyaropa or Apavada? One or two? One. Very good. If you appreciate this point, we will appreciate the beauty of Advaita Vedanta. 3 titles are used, and all 3 titles need to be removed, such that we can be left with pure consciousness. So title of Bharta, title of Grasishnu and Prabha Vishnu. Are they conditioned titles or unconditioned titles? Conditioned titles. All conditioned titles fall under the purview of Adhyaropa. Okay, another point to note here is, don't think Apavada to be superior to Adhyaropa. Oh, this is all Adhyaropa. No. There are 2 steps. Unless you take the first step, we cannot take the second step. So even to think in this way, that consciousness the creation emerges from consciousness. It is sustained by consciousness. And it dissolves back into consciousness. This is a maturity in our spiritual sadhana. Otherwise, common vision is we see only creation. Forget about creation being emerged from something, nourished by something, dissolving back into something. So Adhyaropa is not an inferior step. Adhyaropa is the first step. Okay, Grasishnu, Prabha Vishnu cha. Shankaracharya clarifies, Yatha Rajvadihi Sarpadehe Mithya Kalpitasya. It is just like the illusory snake is born from the rope. It is nourished by the rope and it goes back into the rope. So example that we should use, he says, is these examples. Okay. Next two verses, Bhagavan is concluding the topic, but I will not start it this time. If you have any questions to ask, you can type it quickly. The bringing about creation is due to Maya and Avidya. Consciousness is only lending existence, but not really the cause of bringing about creation. That's true. Consciousness doesn't become a thing which undergoes modification to bring about any creation. See, sometimes we give example of painter and the painting. So just like painting is the creation and painter is the creator. Like that, this universe is the painting of that consciousness. Now it is good as an example. What is the difference between the painter painting example and creation Brahman example? Painter undergoes some modification while doing his painting. Why is it? Because painter and painting are same degree of reality. If it is same degree of reality, there is no way modification will not take place. It has to take place. But in the case of consciousness and creation, modification means what? Painter will get tired. He cannot go on painting. But consciousness doesn't get tired of creation because it is not a cause like this painter. It is a substratum in which creation appears. Okay. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.